G'day and welcome to Lunch Money, the online and social media home for workouts, special situations and capital raising specialists. My name is Nick Samios. I'm the Director and Fund Manager here at Hermes Capital, and I have the pleasure of being your host. Once again, welcome. Just a reminder, if you're on social media, to like, share or subscribe to Lunch Money on YouTube or on iTunes or wherever it is that you're listening to us. Maybe give us a 5-star rating. How about that? That'd be a great idea. If you're watching us live, we invite you to pop a question. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook for that matter, they all have the faculty for you to pop a question, and we can put those questions to our panelists as we go along. Victoria is in lockdown again. That's what's happened in the last week since our last episode. And the numbers coming out of that state, to say the least, are discouraging, if not outright depressing. And you ask yourself, haven't we been here before? We've fought this battle. We've gone through, we've climbed that hill. And here we are again. Are we going to go through it again in New South Wales? I've got a friend who's a business owner, and his business certainly suffered a steep decline in revenue when we shut down in New South Wales. He's now back on his feet. His revenues are back up again. But he said, you know what, if we've got to go through this again, I just don't know if I can take it. And so I think that, as individuals, as businesses and as a community, we're all going to learn something about our resilience and our own personal resources, I guess. At Lunch Money, we talk a lot about corporate restructuring, business turnarounds. And so this week, we're going to talk about the personal journey, whether it's hanging in there, bouncing back, or getting stronger from what did not kill you. I don't think that didn't come out quite right, but you know what I mean. And so to that end, Spotlight is on resilience, and we've got two excellent guest panelists to talk to about that subject today. And I'm going to start off by introducing our first panelist, Arabella Macpherson. G'day, Arabella. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Nick. How are you?
Fantastic. Arabella is a principal at Resonate Communications. She's a communications expert. She does a lot of coaching with CEOs on communications, but a lot more than that. She also coaches on influence, on managing people under extreme pressure. And she's also an expert on resilience as well. I know that a lot of the coaching is around that subject as well. Arabella, just tell us a little bit more about what it is you do. And also, we're interested to know about what's been keeping you busy this week.
Well, thanks, Nick. I'm a corporate communications coach, as you said. I work with CEOs, executives, and senior leadership teams from all sorts of companies in Australia, Asia, the UK, and the US. And around pitching, presenting, influence, negotiation, conflict resolution. But over the last week, I've got a bit of a secret, Nick, in that I moved up to Byron Bay because... And on ABC last night, they had a show on everyone moving to different areas, and Byron Bay was the focus. So, I've made the move up to Byron Bay. I think COVID had a big impact on me personally, and so I needed to take action, which right. I did. And this last week, I have been seeing a new personal trainer. Don't tell Melbournians because their gyms are closed. Yeah. But yeah, we've been working 3 times a week, working on diet, working on getting all the health stuff in order, which is really important right now.
And what about, professionally, do you find, what's the sorts of issues that trouble your clients professionally in these days?
That's a really good question. And in particular with Melbournians, I've been talking a lot with colleagues and clients down there, and they are very, very depressed. They're losing motivation. They're angry and frustrated. I think it's one thing to have the whole country in lockdown, but just to have a certain area in lockdown makes it very, very different, even though I think that there may be a lot of rolling lockdowns throughout the whole country. So what I've been talking to them about is a few things. Firstly is acceptance. And that's the hardest thing, because they say, when will it go back to normal? And I run a workshop on COVID, and my answer is never. It's not going back to normal. There is no normal. And we don't know what it will look like if something does eventuate and stabilize. And the second part is flexibility. So now, okay, how can I be more flexible? What can I do to meet my psychological needs so that I feel good? And the third part is resourcefulness, and that comes really from being more creative. and saying, okay, what do we have access to? How can we help ourselves be in a better state of mind? So they're in a lot of pain, and I think Australia itself is in a limbo land, which means that we get worried, and with fear comes a whole set of behaviours.
Look, I think that, I mean, I agree. I think we are the lucky country, though. I mean, I think that if there was anywhere I had to hunker down, Australia would probably be, the place to be. Some of our Kiwi friends might want to dispute that, but I think that we're in the best place in the world right now. I just wanted to ask you, just along the lines of communications, are you doing any training at all on communicating through Zoom and all that sort of stuff?
Great question. Well, we moved our business online in September last year.
Right.
So we've been running all of our programs online, including Influential Conversations, which has been one of the most popular courses at the moment, which is a 4-week course. And what we've been teaching people is if you can nail online communication, then you will be outstanding when you're face-to-face. So if face-to-face happens at some point, but doing online is way more difficult than doing face-to-face, because you've suddenly got someone in an environment that you don't have any control over. And they've got all their notifications, their emails, people walking in, kids, dogs. Yeah. So you have to be even more strong on your communication skills, which means knowing how the brain works, how to influence it, how to embed messages into their unconscious, and how to overcome resistance.
Right. Well, on that note, our next guest is certainly outstanding face-to-face. We'll put you on pause there for a moment, Arabella. Outstanding face-to-face, and certainly with the odd subliminal message, and that's Ian Hyman. G'day, Ian. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you.
Fantastic. Ian is, of course, the principal at Hymans Valuers and Auctioneers. Now, Ian, you've been the CEO there for 36 years, so that's not much career progression, is it, really?
No, I've moved nowhere. I've moved absolutely nowhere. But I'm happy.
But in that time, you've certainly seen it all. What is it that keeps you busy of late, Ian?
Well, there's been a few issues over the last 12, 18 months that have really sort of come to the fore at the moment. Cyber risk is a big one at the moment. We're putting a lot of resources into encrypting our files and valuations. You may be aware that there was an incident not so long ago where another member of our profession was very unfortunately affected by a breach of confidentiality, and
wow.
It's a great concern for us and for our clients. So I think most of our funders that we work for on the pre-lending side are very keen to ensure that our standards are up to date with the current technology, and we put a lot of time and effort into that. The other areas we've been working quite a lot of business valuation work's been quite strong during the last 6 months. I think even since COVID, there's been a number of shareholders leaving businesses, in particular small shareholders being bought out, needing to determine buy prices. And I think the other areas, I mean, just the basic stuff, it's budget time. We've just finished our budgets, which have been really challenging. It's been a real challenge for next year to try and predict, when things will return to normal, or as Arabella said, maybe never, but, what can we expect in the next 12 months? What should we budget for people-wise, marketing, et cetera, et cetera? It's really tough.
Yeah, certainly budgeting and forecasting is really tough, and we tackled that a couple of weeks ago when we had Jamie Holroyd and Michael Ford on. And it's interesting. I mean, you talk about getting hacked. I mean, when Elon Musk can have his Twitter direct messages hacked, I think we're certainly all in a lot of trouble there. And you mentioned business valuations for partners getting out. Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, what's happening is that as businesses are being challenged, often small shareholders, whether it be in professional practice or businesses, were brought in for a particular skill or on the basis that they'd made undertakings regarding revenue generation, and they're obviously finding it difficult at the moment to meet those targets. And as a result, they've been put under pressure to either leave, or as a result of the pressure, they're deciding that it's time to get out and either do their own thing or try and find another employer that will maybe be able to serve them a little bit better than they are currently.
And that's professional services?
A lot of professional services,
yeah. Look, we're certainly seeing a lot of our colleagues in professional services. I mean, it's interesting because we're all expecting this massive amount of work at some point in time, and it's when they make those sorts of decisions, you wonder whether or not they're undermining their future. But that's another subject for another day. for another day.
Correct.
What we'll do is we'll bring Arabella back, and we'll get on to our theme for today about resilience. And I'll start off with you, Arabella. I mean, what is resilience? Let's sort of define the topic. What is resilience, and is it something you can learn?
Good question. Resilience for me is the ability to deal with any situation at any point, under any circumstances. And so rather than seeing it as a one-off thing, it's almost a process. And it's a process for people to say, okay, what do I need in this moment? How do I get it? And how do I get it consistently? So for a lot of my clients, I think that they're being challenged because they were running on a certain level. Most of them, massive companies, very, very profitable, doing extremely well. And suddenly they've lost a whole lot of revenue. And so they're starting to look at, okay, let's invest in staff and employees in a way that they didn't before.
Right, that's interesting. Okay. And do you think that, do you think resilience is something that we can learn, or is it something that we're either born with or not born with?
I've learned a lot in my life, so I like to think that everyone can learn, but it depends what situation or state they're in. For example, two people can only communicate if they're both in okay space. And as soon as someone goes into distress, they attack, blame, or shut down, become passive aggressive, and cannot communicate, and that other person will quickly follow. And I use a tool from NASA that looks at how people behave under pressure. And what we're seeing is that everyone is in distress. Everyone is under an extreme amount of pressure. And so people aren't in okay space. So how do you teach someone who isn't in okay space how to help themselves come out of distress and back into okay space? And that's a really interesting set of questions. I think, though, that since this is a global phenomenon, I can't even say that word, phenomenon, that people across the world are supporting each other and finding ways. I was told to avoid the productivity porn. So things coming up on your on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you should be doing 20 push-ups. And this is the, I hear the phrase, this is the more than ever. If I hear that phrase more than ever, you need to ... It's too much and people can't take it in. So it's about getting it really simple and saying, okay, what do you need? As we look at the brain, the most important part of the brain where every single decision goes through is the primal brain. And that's asking, am I safe? So number one is making sure that people feel safe. Then secondly, we start to meet their other psychological needs.
Does that resonate with you, Ian? I was just thinking, I mean, you and I wouldn't know anything about, you know, those sort of negative reactions, but yeah,
look, I think obviously everything Arabella said makes absolute sense. I think having been in my own business now for 37 years, and I've bought and sold and been less and more successful in different businesses, I think what you find is that stage of life has a real impact on resilience. I think as you get older, your ability to bounce back becomes more challenging. I don't say it necessarily from my own personal experience, but watching, you know, in the current environment, talking to directors who have been in business for 20, 30 years and now not being able to really be in control of their own destiny. And that challenge, they've been through it before. They were around often for the last recession, the Y2K crisis, the Asian financial crisis, the GFC. And I think this is for some people, it's just one step too far. And they're really struggling with the fact that they can't control what's happening at the moment. It's totally out of their control. And they don't know what is going to happen in the next day, week, month, 6 months, 12 months. And that's, I think, really challenging people's resilience.
I was thinking of having the Chumbawamba song as a theme for today's thing, but it's really about resilience through drinking. So I didn't think that was entirely appropriate. I mean, that's I guess the other thing, Ian, I mean, something that Arabella touched on, I mean, I guess anyone that knows you knows that you're the king of networking, you know, so, and I think that one of the things that, you know, it's all about having people around you and giving support. I mean, do you find that that's something that's helped you, you know?
Yeah, look, I think people become quite insular in these situations. I've always tried to be very conscious of people in my network who may be suffering distress and to try and provide support and comfort, whether it's just a phone call or catching up for a bite to eat. If you could see me without the camera and you could see all of me, you'd understand that I do like to have a bite to eat from time to time. But I think it's, you know, that type of support is really, really important. And I don't think there's enough of that. I think that's still a struggle for most men in particular to pick up that phone and sort of say, "Are you okay?" Which is part of that marketing campaign. But I think for those people that do it, I think they would be getting some wonderful satisfaction out of the outcomes.
I must say that I was angry tweeting the other day. I'm going to delete my Twitter because it's disastrous. But then a friend actually got in touch with me and said, "Listen, are you okay?" And I said, "No, look, I'm just having a bad evening. Really, there wasn't a lot on TV, and that's where I was going." Arabella, I was doing, I didn't want to be 100% off the cuff on this topic today, so I did do a little bit of research. And one of the things I came across, there's all these checklists of, what is resilience, and there's the 7 pillars of resilience and all that sort of stuff. One of these schemes I came across was the factors of resilience, and they included in there's 4 different factors, and one of them was communication skills. And that wouldn't have been necessarily the first thing that popped into my mind. But I thought, given that you're a communications expert, maybe you could talk to that. Why are communication skills so important in resilience?
Yeah, I suppose because this is the time when people do need more support. So it's funny hearing about your tweets, Nick, because
don't look them up, please.
I so am. But at the beginning of COVID, when we went into lockdown, I had this great idea to do 2 videos a day on Facebook and Instagram, checking in with people. And I wanted it to be really real. So I'd have a theme for the day, and then I'd do a check-in and get people to take a deep breath in. And then, how are you feeling? What do you need? And that was great, except that I had to then share my journey throughout COVID. And I did it for about 2 months, every single day, until it was a little too revealing. But the whole point is checking into what it is that you need, and then being able to communicate it without shame, blame, or attack. Now, when there's a stress like a pandemic, we go into fight, flight, freeze. But you can't fight a virus you can't see. We can't flee it because we're stuck in our homes, and we go into freeze mode and we don't communicate what it is we need. And so it's a really important skill that takes you in any relationship or any business or any role that you do. How am I feeling? What do I need? And now, how do I communicate that without shame, blame, and attack to the other people? Yeah,
blame, shame, or attack. It sounds like dishwasher stacking time in my household. But one of the things, and then I just did something there, which was probably oversharing a little bit. But I think that what you're saying is that certainly, I think that one of the, I think good salespeople and good communicators and good negotiators you do have to share a little bit. Sometimes you maybe have to reveal of yourself, and that opens up the other side to revealing as well. In your journey, obviously you've been involved a lot in charity work, and so you've met all sorts of people who have had challenging situations, thrust upon them, and this COVID thing, this will come and go, but sometimes people get challenges in life that they're with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, how do you find? Is resilience, something that is thrust upon you and you learn it, or what is it that you find in the people that you've met, through your charity work? What have you learned about them? What are the differences about how they cope and what?
Look, I think early on when challenges, and we're talking about fundamentally people that have a disabled child, for example, which is in many cases is not known before the event. So firstly, have a very sudden cataclysmic event, which you don't know very much about, and then you have to try and identify the support mechanisms that will help you through that process. But the initial, I think one of the great things about the human being is that the ability to instantly step up for most people in situations is quite extraordinary, and it's very inspiring in that space. And I've had so many inspirational touch points with people over the last 30 odd years in relation to that. The people that have really just gone bang. Okay, the ball game's changed. I've got a clear path. I've got to get on top of this, and there's no recriminations. There's no blame game. It's just okay. What's the best way forward? So I think one of the things possibly we've lucked out on a little bit in our school system is that we're not teaching our children to be, to show that resilience. And I think for people that it's thrust upon like that, that is that natural resilience that we have inside of us. And subsequently, we learn through life, through people like Arabella with those programs, which sound fantastic, how to be resilient. So I think the two are very important together. But I think it's very hard if you don't have a natural tendency to be resilient. To start with nothing in the petrol tank, so to speak, would make it much harder for you. Interesting.
Arabella, what do you think?
Absolutely. So what Ian's talking about is a beautiful state of mind where someone is fully charged and they're becoming fully adaptable. And as human beings, we've adapted throughout the ages to all sorts of different conditions. And so that's at the basis, a part of our primal part of our being is to be flexible and adaptable. But what Ian said is about making sure that we're fully charged. And that's a really important thing. And most people don't know how to charge their own batteries. So how do I meet my own psychological needs so I can now interact with this situation under great pressure or distress? And that's really important. For example, some people need social interaction. They need to have face-to-face. They need to be around people in order to feel like they're fully charged. And how do you do that when you're stuck in your home, maybe living alone? That becomes very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know I've got kids who are 19 and 21, and it's if you cast it's a long not so long for you, Arabella, but certainly for Ian, if you cast your mind back to when we were those ages, imagine being locked down at that age. So certainly that's very challenging. I mean, one of the positive things I take away from what you've both said is that what you're really saying is that we can all do it. There's no, we've got this innate thing to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's a starting point, is to have the belief that we can bounce back. I'm wondering about some of the other coping strategies. I know, Arabella, that this concept of resilience sort of fits somewhere into the concept of emotional intelligence. Is that sort of your bailiwick as well? I mean, how does that fit in?
Yes. So again, it comes down to, if you're not getting your needs met, then you psychologically won't be able to deal with other people in a healthy way. And I am often brought into conflict resolution situations or mediations where a boss will possibly be attacking or bullying their team. And once I sit aside with the boss and have a conversation with them and ask what's going on for them, I find out they're going through a divorce, they're trying to sell their house, they can't sell it because of COVID, their mother's, just a whole set of circumstances that's putting that person under pressure. So when you are put under pressure, or you yourself put yourself under pressure, then you're going to react badly. So I think what it's calling for now is, yes, more self-awareness. What is it that I need in order to feel good? And also stopping in that moment. It actually happened to me on the weekend. I had some friends who came up to visit, and I took them into a shop in Byron Bay, and the shop assistant, I think she thought we were shoplifting or something, but she was incredibly rude to us and ripped open the change rooms, and we were in there, and it was borderline abusive. And it was just interesting to see how we reacted to it. My first instinct was, am I safe? And I was like, yep, I'm safe. And then secondly was to have compassion, like, what's going on for this woman? And funnily enough, the next day I was in the doctor's surgery getting a vitamin B shot so I could feel nice and energetic. And there she was. And She had it in her hands and she wasn't well at all. So I think we've got to put the judgment aside and have more compassion. It doesn't mean anyone can treat you badly. You still need to set boundaries and speak your truth, but understand that there's a whole lot going on for people. And this is even without a global pandemic happening. But that compassion element is really, really important. And that, in fact, helps you become more influential because people trust you more.
Interesting. Ian, one of the coping mechanisms, or one of the things that I think that builds resilience is having focus. And interestingly, one of the things I found was that to help you have focus is to have a secondary passion. Now, I don't know whether a wine is your secondary passion, and I don't mean wine. I mean, is that something you find?
It could be. Look, can I just actually make a comment? I'm one of those very social people, Arabella, and to our listeners that do need a lot of social interaction. My average week would generally be somewhere between 20 and 25 face-to-face meetings with often breakfast, lunches and dinners, married on the same day. So I personally found, whilst financially I'm okay, I've personally found that lack of social contact to be extremely challenging. And at times it's, I say it's been depressing, but it's sort of, you're not in control. I mean, I'm used to being in control of myself and my diary, of my, of our team and our direction. And most of those things have been taken away. So I feel like I'm sort of out in that limbo area a little bit. And that's affected my coping ability to some extent. So, but I agree with Nick that I think having other interests is very important. Mine has been for a long time now is activities involved in the disability sector, and I spend a lot of time in there and I get a lot of satisfaction from that. But again, in a lockdown situation, there's very limited things that you can do in those spaces. So I think for outgoing extroverted people, this is a really difficult time, and I'm probably at the top of that curve. And I can say quite openly and honestly to people that I've really struggled at times with that inability to meet my normal routine and do the things that generate results.
So what's your advice? What's your advice for Ian there, Arabella, on that?
Well,
of course.
So I sat down to do a webinar for 150 people, and before I did it, I did a little video to my audience about doing a check-in, and I just started crying and I said, I'm just really struggling right now. And my mother called me straight up and said, take that off the internet. But I left it up there because a lot of people contacted me, and some people, they'd had a friend commit suicide, other people had, it was just horrendous what people were going through. And I think number one is accepting how am I feeling right now. And secondly, what is it that I need within the circumstances? How can I get that as much as possible? And part of looking at a crisis, if you look at crisis, stage one is making sure you're safe, making sure you've got your house, your food, your toilet paper, whatever you need, but also making sure that you've got an entourage which you can have contact with. And unfortunately, with the first lockdown, I didn't do that. So I was living alone with my dog, and my dog's great, but he's not quite a person, although I thought he was going to answer back. I spoke to him so much. But the point is that you have to know what you need. And if that means making sure that you've got 5 friends that are okay to give you a hug or meet with you or interact with you. But even the people who are introverts and who prefer to spend more time reading and data and facts or analytics, they still need that social element. And I think that they're surprised that they're needing that more than they have before.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I mean, you're sort of almost at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs there, and shelter and security, but you're also saying build an entourage as well, which is very interesting as well. I mean, look, when all of this first hit, the first thing I did, I guess I called it walking the perimeter. It's a military term that I learned from one of my clients, but we actually talked about this in our very first podcast. But the idea was, firstly, make sure that your staff are safe and secure and feel secure and feel looked after, and then obviously the next, once you've sort of looked after the staff, making sure the clients are good, making sure that they understand that we're here, and here's how we're going to plow through this, so that they can worry about. They got other things to worry about. What I don't want my staff worrying about, I don't want my clients worrying about us. Right? You guys, you got enough to worry about. So let's lock that down, and then that's a base then to build on. So yeah, it's interesting you say that. I guess the other thing, we nearly had a third guest this morning. I was talking to my personal trainer, who has done a lot of mixed martial arts fighting. You know, he's not anymore, but he's got a career in that. So certainly in that game, you know what it is. You know, you've got to learn how to get up off the canvas, otherwise you're not going to make it. And I was going to ask him along, but unfortunately he's got clients and etc. But you started off, Arabella, talking about basic physical needs, health, you know, nutrition and exercise, and I guess looking after yourself is probably step one.
Yeah. So Nick, what you were talking about then about making sure you're safe, your family's safe, your staff are safe, your clients are safe, your community is safe. What we're really doing here, if we look at transactional analysis, is reparenting. So we're reparenting ourselves, and we're taking that it's called the inner father. It's quite stereotypical.
Right. Is this Freud?
Pardon?
Is this Freud?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're doing is reparenting ourselves and saying, okay, the inner father jumps in and goes, okay, what do you need in terms of security? What do our clients need? What does our community need? And step one is getting that physical body really healthy, because your gut and brain connection is, I mean, it's so strong. So what you eat will affect your thoughts. But at the beginning of this year, I decided to do alcohol-free 2020. I mean, it was such a bad idea. But it's been step one. Okay, how can I just help support myself? Because it's already going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of pressure. And then what else do I need to do physically to make sure that I am the best vessel to create the best thoughts? Having said that, human beings, when we're in distress, will sabotage. We will do the opposite to what we're supposed to do. We've got a mechanism in our brain that makes us do that. So heaps of forgiveness for all of us, including myself, on all the other things that I've done that hasn't been helpful, and just going, okay, what's one thing that I can do today? And for me, it was getting help. So calling up a personal trainer, and he doesn't take any excuses. So
and going off to Byron, it's amazing how many people seem to be actually one of my personal training partners just spent 2 weeks up there. So interesting place. Look, let's maybe just by way of wrapping up, if we can just sort of focus on the small business owner. You know, they've I'm thinking particularly in New South Wales, I guess, where we're really worried. I guess Queensland seems to have got itself sorted out. They're getting the AFL and they're getting the car races and all the rest of it. And WA seems to be fine as well. I mean, you know, WA seems to be going probably the best out of the whole country. But there are people that are saying, look, you know, they've got their small businesses, that they've got the job keeper, and they've got things that are keeping them afloat. I mean, what would you say to them to help them keep their heads right to get through this? I'll start with you, Ian, and then I'll finish up with Arabella.
Well, I think the important thing, and I've been trying to achieve this myself, is to stop blaming yourself for the situation, and you lay awake at night thinking, you know, and our revenue's been down substantially since beginning of April, and it hasn't really moved that much over April, May, June, and now we're halfway through July, and whilst we can tailor our business to meet our revenue, obviously that involves some pretty significant decision making to occur at some point, and nobody likes to, you know, have to make those tough calls. It's quite upsetting, and when they do come around. So look, I think you know, try to set your own expectations that are realistic. I think that's really important, and to then sort of have a plan. Not just with your business, but with your family, with your wife. My wife's been an amazingly supporting. Been married, thankfully, for 32 years. Without her, the job would be so much harder, and I certainly empathise with you being on your own. As someone who's an extrovert, even having my wife at home with me 24/7 for many weeks, I still found it that I needed more, you know. So I think the plan is really important, but also setting realistic expectations and being prepared to accept you're going to go backwards. I found that the hardest thing to accept initially was that we're not going to be where we were in 3 months' time. We are going to be having to make up some ground, and no one likes to go back over old territory and have to basically climb up that mountain again. We're going to have to do it, and that's what we've got to accept.
Arabella?
I agree with Ian. It's funny because 12 months ago, when we were talking about with a colleague of mine putting out a whole body of work on the crisis playbook, like what to do if a crisis occurs, and now is the time that playbook would be in play. And it's about sitting down, as Ian said, and saying, okay, because no one can deal with unknowns. And the only thing you can do is get control by getting clear and saying, okay, what is the next 6 months? What's our worst case scenario, best case scenario? And accepting that things have completely changed. So if my business is a face-to-face business, how can I do it more online? What elements can I shift or change? And how can I innovate in order to get our business still working in a way it needs to?
Okay, yeah. Look, I mean, I guess for myself, I just try and maintain optimism. I mean, I've said right from the beginning, you know, we are going to get through this. When everybody was panicking about, you know, face masks and, you know, hand sanitizer. Look, the way the world works is that you know, eventually, you know, someone will provide what we need, you know, when it comes to all of that manufacturing stuff. We are going to get through it. I mean, in a year's time, in fact, one of the sort of little coping mechanisms, there's a great article called from the Harvard Business Review, Managing Your Energy, Not Your Time. And it talks about the long lens, the wide lens, and the reverse lens. You're familiar with that one, Arabella? But, you know, if we take the long lens is, what is this going to look like in 2 years' time? You know, we're going to look back on it. We're going to say, you know what, we got through it. Hopefully we made the most of it, and you know, that's one of the things too, is making the most of it. All right, look, we will just about wrap up there. Arabella, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, is it resumecoms.com? Is that the best way, or what's the best way that they can find you?
We also have remote work support, which is another website that we put up to help companies through this period.
Yep. Well, they can certainly find you on LinkedIn. I've linked to your profile in all the promotional stuff. And Ian, thank you very much for joining us today. You know, I didn't want to get you on and talk about fascinating stuff, of course, the world of plant and equipment evaluation and auctioning. But I've had a couple of comments here of people really appreciating this session. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Arabella. Thank you very much, Ian. And thank you to everybody who's watched us live, and thank you to everybody who listens to us on playback on the podcast and on YouTube. See you again. Cheers.
Okay.